Today, he's a designer. You may know him from Fiasco, Grey Ranks, Night Witches, and many other games. And he's one of my special favorites because he's crossing the boundaries between role-playing games, tabletop role-playing, and LARPs, which is like extra rare thing from my perspective. So I'm very happy to have you with us, Jason. And well, welcome. We're very eager to hear you tell about stuff that you know a lot of about.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to Konline. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy this event is happening. So I'm going to talk. This talk is really a pep talk. I want to encourage people to think of themselves as game designers. And I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, to make games. So the talk is, you can make a game and you should. I gave this same talk last April in Korea, and it was well received there, and I hope that it will also be well received here. So my goals, and this talk will probably take 30 to 45 minutes. I want to outline a process for analog game design. And I want to get you excited. I would like to get you fired up about making your own game. When I say analog game design, I'm really talking about tabletop role-playing games, live-action role-playing games, not digital games, but games that could use digital medium to play. But for example, I'm talking about, for the most part, games that you're going to play face-to-face, or you're going to play with your friends over Skype, for example, as opposed to video games or strictly digital games. So making games is very easy, and it's also very hard. Here's some things that are very easy. It's easy to have cool ideas. Everybody has cool ideas. It's easy to talk about your cool ideas. Everybody loves to talk about their cool ideas. And it's easy to take your cool ideas and make them into games. And that's really what we're going to be talking about. However, here are some things that are very hard. Having cool ideas, because sometimes being creative is difficult. Sometimes coming up with and articulating new ideas is very hard. Something that's very hard to do is to shut up about your cool ideas, but you're going to have to, because no one wants to hear about your cool ideas when they're just ideas. And it's also very hard to make your cool ideas into actual games. So you may see that there is a contrast here, and maybe some irony that these things are both very easy and very difficult at the same time. I want to stress that this is a great time to be making games. There's never been a better time, really. There are lots of tools that are available now. Even 5 years ago, there weren't the tools that we have at our disposal now. So it's exciting that we're in a golden age. There are also big communities of practice. The ones that I'm familiar with are in English. There may be communities of game design in Polish as well. If there are, I'm not familiar with them. And if there aren't, you'll need to start your own. You will know better than I about that. But the idea that we can get together and support each other and help each other and learn from each other in communities is nothing new, but it's a great time for that. And the tools that are out there now are amazing for sharing ideas, for playtesting, for writing, for publishing and distributing our games. There's never been a better time. Well, maybe a few months ago was a better time, but the tools are there, and that's really great. So here's some thoughts on making games. So I want to stress before I get into this that I'm really talking to you about my process and the things that I think are important. I don't want you to take these guidelines as more than suggestions. I really encourage you to find your own way and to do the things that are successful to you, for you, and that are going to make you happy. So I have opinions, but they're just that. This process works for me. It may not work for you, and that's completely fine. I always start out with an idea that excites me. I'm not interested in originality. I think originality is bullshit. If you make it, it's going to be original enough. There are lots of games about space cowboys. There are lots of games about regular cowboys, and every one of them is different, and every one of them is original and interesting. You don't need to reinvent a genre. It's exciting if you have an idea that will, but if you want to make a game that is in a well-established space, that's totally fine. By the time you're done, it's going to be your own game and it'll be different. And I think that's great. The fact that you are making it is going to make it original enough. And of course, here's a quote from T.S. Eliot. Immature poets imitate and mature poets steal. And I'll be talking about stealing quite a lot, I think. The idea here, in my mind, is that you shouldn't really fixate on trying to create something new. It's going to be new because you're making it. And if you push too hard, you may be unhappy with the result, or you may fail. There are reasons why lots of people make games in particular genres, because those genres are well loved and well understood and have patterns in them that people appreciate and can latch onto. So don't be afraid to make your swords and sorcery game. It's going to be unique because you're making it. That may be a bad example. There are lots of sword and sorcery games, but the idea here is that I don't want to discourage people from exploring things that are of interest to them, but that may already exist, because the process of creation is going to make it unique. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, that's the first thing you should do, right? Have an idea that excites you. The opposite of this is making a game because you know people will like it, or because you know other people are excited by it. That's a terrible approach, in my opinion, because if you're not passionate about it, if you're not interested in it, it's not really going to be successful. And it's going to be communicated in everything you do that you are not excited about it. So pick something you are excited about. I wish sometimes that I were more excited about swords and sorcery, because there's a lot of potential there for success. Lots of people are interested in that. It's evergreen. People are always interested in new stuff related to that. And were I someone who is excited about it, I could be making lots of things that people would want. And instead, the things that I'm excited about tends to be very focused and sort of on the fringes. And I have to find my own audience where I can. And that's okay, because I hope that the things that I make communicate that excitement and passion, and that for that small group of people who like what I do, that will be something that they can see too. So it's important, once you have an idea, you need to think about what it is. What's it going to be? It's very possible that you could describe your idea in terms of a game that already does exactly what you want. And in that case, it's not a bad idea to say, let's just do that. I've got a great idea for a game about queer teenagers who are also secretly monsters, and they have competing agendas, but they also need to deal with being teenagers. Well, there's a game called Monster Hearts that does that pretty much perfectly. I don't think I need to necessarily make a new game about that. Now, maybe I have a wonderful take on that, and it's very different from what Monster Hearts does. But honestly, if I see a game that's perfect for what I want to do and that already makes me happy, I'm going to use that, at least as a starting point. Maybe you need to question whether the thing that you want to make needs to be a game at all. Maybe the thing that you want to make isn't Monster Hearts, but is a setting for Monster Hearts. Or maybe it's not a science fiction adventure, or a science fiction game, but rather a science fiction adventure for a game you already love. There's design in that as well, and you'll be so much happier if you can come to an understanding of what the thing you want to make is. Maybe your idea is Monster Hearts, but you're not happy with the way Monster Hearts handles some particular element of the genre. It's a wonderful idea to take that game and hack it, make it your own. Take the pieces that work for you and build onto those. That gives you a successful framework that you know works, and you can build from there. And maybe eventually that's going to become its own game. Maybe not. I think about there's a game called Polaris, and Polaris is a fantasy game about doomed knights at the end of the world fighting demons. And it's a very melancholy game. You know that your characters, these very noble knights, are going to fail. And at the end of it, the bad guys are going to win. And a designer named Anna Kreider saw that. She saw that and was inspired by it and made a game called Thou Art But a Warrior. And it uses the same framework, but it tells the story of the Reconquista, the Christian reoccupation of Spain and the destruction of the caliphate in Spain. And you, in that game, you play Muslim knights fighting the Christians who are coming to retake Spain, and you're going to lose. And it's a very sad, melancholy game in the same way, but it puts a historical gloss on it. And really, by the time Anna was done redesigning Polaris and turning it into Thou Art But a Warrior, it had become a completely new game. So it started out as a hack of Polaris, but she wanted to do specific things with it. And by the time she was done, it was something new. So she could have started out and invented her own game, but there was already a very good one to build from. And so she did that. I want to stress at this point that hacking is game design. Making house rules is game design. Everyone listening to this, as far as I'm concerned, is a game designer. You're doing things already. If you're playing D&D and you change the encumbrance rules, you're designing, right? You're making changes to suit your specific needs. And I think that's wonderful. And I want you to think as broadly as possible about what you're doing and how you can expand that to meet your own needs first, and then to meet the needs of your friends and the people that you play with. And who knows, maybe a larger community. Your goals are your own, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the idea here is that you're free. You're already doing this. And I want you just to do it to design as much as you want in whatever ways you want, without anyone telling you not to, or that there are barriers in your way, because in many cases there are not. Okay, I mentioned goals. You should. I think it's a good idea to know what you're trying to do. Maybe what you're trying to do is to make something for yourself and your friends that you want to play. I have to tell you that almost all of my games start there. I have friends that I know and love, and I want to make games that I can play with them. I want to make games that will delight them, that they'll be so happy to play with me. And that's where I start, almost always. Sometimes that's as far as a game will get. My friends and I will play it, and we'll laugh and have a great time, and I'll be done with it. That's all the game design I want to do around that idea. That happens sometimes. Other times, I will have in mind that the thing I'm working on is really interesting and I want to share it. I want to find a way to publish it or somehow share it. And when I say publish, that could be creating a PDF that other people could download and look at. It might be actually putting it in a book or a box that I'm going to sell. But the goal there is to share it in some way. If I'm excited about it, usually I want to share it. Personally, I love to see other people playing my games. That brings me a lot of happiness. So very often I will be motivated to want to share my work. Not always. And I'm always open to those goals changing. Sometimes I'll make a thing and I'll love it and my friends will love it and I'll share it a little more widely and it'll become really obvious that it's not going to be something that is going to be successful as a commercial product. It's not going to be something that I'm going to make money off of. And then my goals change and that's fine. I'm happy with that. I'm constantly trying to make new things. And if some of them are successful and some of them are not, that's just part of the process for me. Now, if your goal is to gain some kind of credibility and to justify all the time and money you're sinking into the hobby, I would suggest that that is a bad goal. It's a very bad goal because it's not going to work and you're just going to end up unhappy. You really shouldn't be making things out of any motivation other than your own excitement, at least at first. It's very possible that you'll make something really interesting and cool, and then you will gain some kind of credibility or respect because you made a cool thing, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but that should never be your goal. You don't need to be, quote unquote, become a game designer just to be cool or to gain some respect in some community. I think that's a terrible thing to do, and more likely than not, it's going to fail. The final goal that you might have is one of artistic drive. It's quite possible that you just don't have a choice. I find this happens a lot for me, that I'm driven to create, and early in my life, I chose game design as the outlet of my creativity. It combines a lot of things that I really both enjoy and think are useful and important in the world. And if I wasn't doing this, I don't know what I would be doing as a creative outlet. I really feel, in my case, that I don't have much choice. I have to make games. And so that's part of what I think about when I think about goals that I'm setting. I know that I'm going to be doing it. I'm constantly developing new ideas, and I've accepted that as part of my process. So let's say that you've got an idea you're excited about. You're excited to share it. You want to make something that you're going to share with your friends and enjoy. It's time to really think about what your game looks like. And there are some really straightforward questions you can always ask. These are wonderful design questions. And if you were to ask me, if you were to approach me and say, hey, Jason, I have this idea. These are the questions I would ask you. What's your game about? Thou Art But a Warrior, Anna Kreider's game, is about fighting to hold on to something that is dear to you while knowing that that effort ultimately will fail. That's what it's about. You do a lot of cool stuff in that game, but in the end, that's what it's about. Fiasco is about dumb people getting in trouble. That pretty much describes Fiasco. Another way to describe it is it's about powerful ambition and poor impulse control. That's another way you could describe Fiasco. So once you're excited about an idea, see if you can narrow it down so that if someone asks you that question, you can very quickly answer it. So how does your game do this? This is another great question. It seems very simple, but it's surprisingly deep. What do the players do and what do the characters do? So how does Fiasco tell you a story about dumb people getting in trouble? Well, it does that in a number of ways, but everything in the game drives the players to do things that will make their characters get into trouble and be stupid. And the characters themselves have the freedom to get into trouble and to be stupid. All the choices you make when you set up your game are designed to create trouble. All the moments in the game are designed to give you an opportunity to make bad choices and to do dumb things. And the game itself supports that with a couple of specific things that happen during play that inject chaos and craziness into it. How does your game encourage and reward this? Well, Fiasco is an interesting example of this, because the reward in Fiasco is the misery and chaos that you create. It turns a normal role-playing game upside down, I think. In Dungeons and Dragons, you want to succeed. The rewards are tangible. The rewards are gold pieces. They're leveling up. They're experience points. Your characters get better. They can do more cool things. In Fiasco, all of that is missing, and you're really playing to lose. You want your characters to fail because failure is fun. And so the game encourages and rewards that with feedback loops, which I'll talk about in my next talk in half an hour or so, that reward that specific kind of behavior. And the last question you should be asking is, how is this fun? And I particularly want to stress that you can define fun in lots of different ways. And you should think about fun very broadly. It's a very difficult term, because the fun in Fiasco is not the fun in Grey Ranks. Grey Ranks is a pretty serious game. It's a pretty sad game. And if you talk about it being fun to play, you need to define that fun. Maybe it is cathartic. Maybe it is instructive. Maybe it creates empathy. Maybe it builds emotional connection to events in history. Those things can all be very satisfying, and that's a kind of fun. Punching somebody in the nose and blowing up a car is another kind of fun. I guess you could blow up a car in Grey Ranks too. Bad example. But the silly, stupid things that happen in a game of Fiasco are very obvious, very broad fun. But there can be fun in very serious things as well. And I want to make sure that you think about it very broadly. So one term that I've heard that I think is appropriate is type 2 fun. So type 1 fun is I'm going to laugh out loud because it's genuinely hilarious. And type 2 fun is I'm enjoying this because it's challenging me in some way. Fiasco, type 1 fun. Grey Ranks, type 2 fun. So if you're thinking about making a game, make sure you can answer these questions, because they will help you design it. What's it about? How does it do that? What does everybody do when they're playing that game? How does your game encourage that? And how is that fun? And if you can't answer those, you need to spend some more time with it. And if the answer to how is this fun is, well, it's not, then you need to think about changing your game a little bit or finding a way to make it fun. So those questions can form a framework. They can be a framework that you build your game around. And your real goal, once you have those clear, is to communicate your excitement for it through that framework. One exercise that I find very useful is just to imagine what's going to happen. What does your game feel like in your mind if you were playing it, even though you haven't made it yet? What does a cool, fun scene in your game look like? This is really useful as a design exercise. And if you do this, you're going to get all kinds of insight into your game, because it's going to tell you where the fun is, and it's also going to tell you kind of how to get to that fun. I think it's useful as a design exercise to play everything you possibly can, to have the widest range of sources that you can. You should, my advice to you is to shamelessly play every game you can. Board games, LARPs, card games, role-playing games, video games. All of these have insight that can tell you what works and what doesn't, what you like and what you don't like. What are things that might be successful for your game? Maybe there's something that's very close to your game that you know works very well. For example, maybe you play a lot of Apocalypse World or Apocalypse World derived games. That's a great framework to start from. You know, you could start there and just change the things that you feel that you need to. I think that's wonderful. And if there's a game that works, go ahead and just start hacking away at that. Let that be a framework that you're communicating through. Finally, a piece of advice about communicating your own excitement is just to see what happens when you do things that are not smart, when you do things that you know are going to fail. Sometimes you learn a lot by trying things that are not that smart. Things that you know are broken, ideas that are not that great, might lead to solutions. Maybe if you play test with people and try something that you know is just a half-assed approach, someone might be able to get some insight from that and give you really useful feedback that surprises you. So don't be afraid to take risks and try new things. And dumb things. Be dumber. I'm super dumb all the time. It's really easy to make something that you keep to yourself. And it's easy because you're not taking any risks when you do that. You don't risk rejection. You don't risk criticism. You don't risk having to make something wonderful even better or to share your work more widely. I urge you not to do this if you can avoid it. Sometimes you might make an experiment, realize it's just not worth continuing and throw it aside. That's great. But quite often, it's better to take something that you might kind of be apprehensive about and just share it with people you can trust. Your best bet is to cultivate a group of people around you that you love and trust and that are willing to look at your crazy, dumb ideas. And the best way to make a group like that is to practice that with others. Find other people who want to make games and look at their crazy, dumb ideas. When you want to share things, don't worry about how it looks, but do worry about making sure that it's functional and that it's easy to understand. Make it as clear as you possibly can. Think about, as you're writing down your ideas, that someone else has to read them and understand them. Try to be as clear and objective as you possibly can. Don't assume anyone knows the things that you know. And of course, try it. See if it works. Probably won't. You'll be surprised when you do. And then you can refine those ideas. See what you can improve. Maybe you can't improve it. Maybe there's one good idea in it, and you can strip that idea out and use that as a part of something new. Maybe you just need to let it sit for a while. For myself, I spend a lot of time with ideas that are just sitting in a drawer because I don't know what to do with them. They don't work. I don't know how to fix a problem. I'm just leaving it alone. And I'm going to give you an example of that. In 2007, I heard about the Night Witches. I heard about the history of these women who fought for the Red Army during World War II, and I was immediately excited by them. I was excited by the idea. I wanted to make a game about it. And all the stuff that I'm talking to you about today, I went through all those steps. I got excited about it. I figured out what this game was going to be about. I was able to clearly articulate that. I built a framework and I made a whole game about the Night Witches, and it was terrible. It was a bad game. It was not interesting or fun to play. It just didn't work. So what I had was an idea that I was very excited about, but I just didn't have the tools to make it successful. And so I didn't get discouraged because I have lots of ideas, and ideas are cheap, and originality is bullshit. So I took my Night Witches game and I just put it away. I filed it away and I moved on to other things. And a few years later, I played Apocalypse World for the first time, and I realized that suddenly there was a new framework that I could use to make Night Witches. And I was so excited and happy that I pulled it out of the drawer and I started working on it again within this new framework. I started hacking Apocalypse World. And over time, Night Witches, while it retains many of the features you see in Apocalypse World, really became its own game. And it's approaching the design in a somewhat new way that I'm very proud of. And it uses just a few pieces of that original game from 2007. So never be afraid to just throw it aside for a while. Now, I'm encouraging you to share your ideas, share your work, show it to other people. Other people are going to beat your game up, right? They're going to play it wrong. They're going to misunderstand it. They're going to play it in ways you didn't anticipate. They're going to play it the way that they understand it, which is not going to be the way that you understand it. They're going to have bad ideas, and they're going to share those bad ideas with you. When people share their bad ideas with me, I thank them, and I ignore their bad ideas. They might have good ideas. It's also possible that people playing your games will never have a good idea about it, and that's okay too. You still should thank them, because the act of play testing an unfinished game is an act of love and kindness, and they deserve your thanks, even if they don't return any useful feedback for you. Sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes people will play your game and say, Jason, I really enjoyed this. Here's what you need to do to fix it. And if you hear that, they're about to tell you some bad ideas. When someone tells you something didn't work in your game, that's incredibly useful. They're telling you about a piece of friction that they encountered that made it hard for them to play. That's very, very valuable. When they tell you how to fix that problem, more times than not, it's not useful to you. You should always take it with a grain of salt. When someone tells you how to fix your game, what you should do, they're usually wrong, because they're not you and it's not their game. So, be careful about that. Sometimes if it's someone who you love and trust and really understands what you're trying to do, they can give you valuable advice. Sometimes not so much. So be careful when you're getting feedback, to make sure that you be proud of your ideas, and don't be ashamed of rejecting suggestions that don't match your vision. And as always, remember, nothing is final. You can always take it apart. You can always refine it, change it. Maybe after you've play tested it and other people have enjoyed your game, you realize that you need to strip it down, take pieces for some other project, or put it in a drawer for a while and let it rest. So there should be some reflection throughout the process as you're making a new game. You should be thinking about how you would answer these questions that I've posed, and maybe those change. What's your game about is something that can change over time, and that's fine. But there's a point at which you're going to feel that it's ready, and that's a great time to just think again about what you're doing. At this point, does its final format matter? Is it important to you? Are you going to make it into a book that you publish? Those are things that you can think about at the end of the process. I urge you not to think about them at the beginning of the process because your ideas might change. But at a certain point, you know, it's time to think about that. When you reach this point, I would love to see it. And I would be happy to sing your game's praises in English if that's useful to you. And I just want to end this talk by really encouraging you not to let people discourage you. I think that it's very common, unfortunately, for people to gatekeep, to say, if you have done this, then you get this title. If you have achieved this, then you have earned this kind of respect. And I think that that's harmful in a lot of ways. Of course, I think it's fine to have respect and admiration for someone who's done something that you think is great or that whose work you've enjoyed. But that doesn't put them in an elevated place that makes what they do somehow special and impossible for you to achieve. You're already making games, you're already a designer, and I want you to take that to heart. Don't let people tell you that you're not. Don't let people tell you that your work is less valuable for whatever reason. Be proud of what you do and love it and be excited about it. And I hope that I get to see lots of inspiration that comes out of this sort of a talk. I want to see more games from all of you. So let's make that happen. And thank you very much. I'm very glad that I got a chance to talk to you.